Hey guys, so we are going to start geometry now, and Unit 1 of geometry is learning about all of the definitions that are involved in geometry. So geometry is a lot of shapes and stuff, and you have to know what each of them represents and how to name everything. So what we're going to start with is we're going to talk about a point. So a point is um, a point anywhere in space. And it's important to note that a point is labeled with a capital letter. So when we call a point or label a point, you have to label it with a capital letter. So for example, if I were to call this point A, I would put a capital A there, and then how you would name this is you'd say this is point A, okay? And then when we're talking about a line, now a line has no end. So therefore arrows have to be present in order for me to make a line, okay? And then how we label lines is we use capital letters again, and if I use the letters C and D to name the 2 points on the line, then you would name this line CD with a line on top of the 2 letters. Or you could also name it line DC. You could go in the opposite order, and then you draw a picture of a line with arrows at the end, and that's how you label a line. A plane, on the other hand, is labeled by any 3 points. So any 3 points make a plane. Okay? So we can name a plane by any 3 points. So if you look at the example here, I can name 3 points here. Let's call this E, and let's call this F, and let's call this one G, right? So how I would name this is I would call this plane EFG, because there are 3 points to name a plane. Another way that you can name a plane, though, however, another way that you can name a plane is you can use like an italicized letter to name a plane. So if I use an italicized letter in the top hand corner, then I can also call this plane X. It's like an italicized letter that you will see also used to name a plane. Okay, so any 3 points can make a plane, any 2 points can make a line. So looking at a couple pictures, if we look at these pictures that we have below, in the first one, we have, if I label this again, we have A, B, and C. And notice that A, B, and C make a plane. So you have plane A, B, C. But look, if I put a point out here and let's call it J, notice that plane J does not lie on the plane. Okay? So remember, any 3 points can make a plane, but plane J does not actually lie on that plane unless it is part of the 3 points, okay? So it's important to notice that, okay? Same with if I were to label a box, or if I were to draw some sort of plane in here. Let's say I label a point K, a point here L, and a point here G, okay? Then I can say that plane KLG, that points KLG make a plane, okay? But if I were to draw another point and say up here and call it H, H does not lie on that same plane, okay? So planes are made up of 3 letters, but it's important to notice which one lies on the plane and which one doesn't. And that's where these words come into play, where you have collinear and coplanar. You have to know what these words represent. So collinear is the term co means that they are together, right? Something that is together when you say the word co in front of a word. So collinear are any 2 points that make a line. That's what collinear means. Okay, so if you are able to make a point in a plane, let's say we draw the line and the points A, B, and C here, then I know that points A, B, and C are collinear because they all lie on a line, okay? But also notice if I were to draw a point D over here, D would not be collinear with ABC, okay, because it does not fall on the same line. Coplanar, on the other hand, are any 3 points. Any 3 points make a plane, okay? Sometimes a plane can be labeled with 4 points, though. So you need, in order for something to be coplanar, they have to lie on the same plane. And in order for something to be collinear, they have to lie on the same line. So we've got coplanar and collinear. So if you look at our example of coplanar, let's say that we were to put the letters E, or the points E, F, G, and H over here. Then you would say plane, or not plane, but you would say points E, F, and G are collinear. E, F, G, and H are collinear here. So points E, F, G, and H are coplanar here. Sorry, not collinear, but coplanar because they lie on the same plane, okay? But you would say, similarly, you would say point D. Similarly, you would say points E, F, G, and D would not be coplanar because it does not lie on the same plane. So remember, in order for something to be coplanar, it has to lie on the same plane. In order for something to be collinear, it has to lie on the same line. Okay? E, F. Then moving on to a couple more definitions on this page of your notes, we have a line segment. So notice that a line segment has 2 endpoints. Let's call these endpoints F and G, okay? So a line segment has 2 endpoints, and we name a line segment by putting the letters, the capital letters, F and G, with a line segment on top. Or you could write it as GF, or line segment GF with a line segment on top. So line segments have 2 endpoints, and then you have rays. Rays have 1 endpoint, and then go on forever, right? In one direction, okay? So if I use the letter C here, and then I put another point on my ray and call it D, then I would have to name this ray CD. And order matters here. You have to start with the endpoint, okay? So when you are naming a ray, you have to start with the endpoint. Start with the endpoint, okay? Because if you don't start with the endpoint, it will not be marked as correct. So you cannot name this ray DC. It is ray CD, okay? Because C is the endpoint. And then let's talk a little bit about parallel and perpendicular lines. So parallel lines never touch. So parallel lines are 2 lines that will never touch or will never intersect. This is why they talked about intersecting lines. They are lines that touch one another, okay? But parallel lines never touch. So examples of parallel lines would be if I draw a line and call it AB, and then I draw another line over here parallel to it and call it CD. These lines will never touch. They'll go forever in the directions, but they will never touch one another. So that's an example of parallel lines. Perpendicular lines, on the other hand, are lines that meet at a 90-degree angle. So remember, a 90-degree angle means it forms a perfect 90 degrees, and there's even a little box to indicate that there is a 90-degree angle there. So perpendicular lines are 2 lines that do intersect, and they meet at a 90-degree angle, which is usually marked by a box. So again, if I call this line AB, and then if I call this line CD, using the 2 letters to name a line, then I can say that AB, line AB, is perpendicular, and that's the symbol we use for perpendicular, okay? It's like an upside down T, is perpendicular to CD. Similarly, I forgot to mention that the line we use for parallel, if I were to say these 2 lines were parallel, I'd say line AB is parallel. You just draw 2 lines next to one another. That's the symbol for parallel lines. So line AB is parallel to line CD. So again, geometry is about a lot of labeling and understanding what each of the labels mean. So then when you get to the topics in ALEKS, this is what it's going to ask you to do. It's going to give you a picture of a plane and lines, okay? And then it's going to ask you to name or fill in the true facts, and sometimes the not so true facts of these statements. So in the first fact, it asks us to fill in point B, blank and blank, are distinct points that are collinear. Remember, collinear means that they lie on the same line. So if you look at our picture, the point B lies on the same line as the point C, which lies on the same line as the point D. There are only three letters that lie with B to make a line. So the answers there would be points C and D. The next statement says line FC and line blank are distinct lines that intersect. So remember, in order for a line to intersect, they have to touch at some point. So if you look at line FC over here in our picture, the only other line that it touches with is this line, which we can use two letters to name. We can call that line BD. We could also call that line BC. We could also call it CD. There's a bunch of names that we could call it, but they only need one here. So you would pick one of those to put in. In part C, it says point E blank, blank, and blank are distinct points that are coplanar. So remember, we need at least 3 points to make a plane, and coplanar means that they lie on the same plane. So the only 4 points that lie with E on the same plane are shown in this picture here. We've got E, A is in that plane, so we would say point A would be in that plane. Point F is in that plane, and the only other point in that plane would be point C. So it must be A, F, and C that would be filled in there. And then in the last one, it says another name for plane X, which this plane is called plane X, is plane blank. Well, remember, again, definitions are key when it comes to that a plane is any 3 letters. You can use any 3 letters to name a plane. So if you look at your picture of your plane, we could use the 3 letters A, E, F to fill in here, or we could use the letters C, F, E. We could use A, C, E. It doesn't matter as long as you use 3 letters to name that plane. And that's what it's going to be asking you to do in ALEKS, is fill in the facts based on the picture. Okay? In geometry, remember. And then we have in our notes just an overview of a bunch of definitions for geometry, what they look like, and how to name it. So quickly going through these, we're starting with, as a review, we're starting with each of the ones, and I'll switch between colors. So first you have a point. A point is a precise location or place on a plane. So the diagram of a point would be just drawing a point in space and using a capital letter to name it. So this would be called point A, okay? Then we have lines. Line is an object that is straight, has no thickness, and goes on forever in both directions. So remember, for a line, we use arrows to know that it goes on forever. And you label a line by 2 letters. You use 2 letters to label a line. So if I use the letter CD, then I would call this line CD. I could also call it line DC. Order does not matter here. A plane is a flat surface that has no thickness and goes on forever in all directions. You can use any 3 non-collinear points to name a plane. So if I were to draw a picture of a plane, so we've got a picture of a plane here, and let's say letters in here would be F, G, and H, then remember you can use 3 letters to name this plane, and this would be called plane FGH. And the order does not matter here either. You could call it HGF or any other order that you would like. A line segment is a part of a line consisting of 2 endpoints. So remember, when you're looking at a line segment, you have 2 endpoints. So there are 2 specific points that have an end, and there are no arrows here. So if I use the letters I and J to name this, then this would be line segment IJ with a line segment on top. Or you could go the other way around and you could call this line segment JI. Okay, it has two endpoints. Array is the one where order matters. So array is a part of a line which starts at a point and goes on forever. So a picture of array would be it starts as a point and starts at a point, goes on forever in either direction. And then if we label that point, let's say H and K, then the only way that I can name this line is, or sorry, the only way that I can name this ray is HK. You have to start at the end point here, okay? When it says opposite rays are two rays with a common endpoint that form a straight line. So for example, opposite rays would be they have a common endpoint and they go opposite directions. So let's say this endpoint is C. Let's call this point F and let's call this point D. Then you would say that you would call one of these rays, the first one that goes, let's say, in the right direction. You would call that ray CD. And you would say ray CD is an opposite ray to ray CF. Okay, those are called opposite rays. So you'd have ray CF and ray CD there. And then further talking about points, or sorry, definitions in geometry that you were going to deal with. There are angles in geometry. So an angle is a figure formed by two rays that have the same endpoint. So a picture of an angle would be like this. This would be an angle. And let's say we call this C, we call this D, and we call this E. Okay, so that would be a angle that has a similar endpoint made up of two rays. And you can name this angle in four different ways. Okay, so when using three letters, the the vertex of an angle must be in the middle. Okay, so in other words, if I were to name this angle, I would call this angle ECD, or I could call it angle DCE, but notice how I kept the C in the middle because the C is the endpoint that ties it together, also known as the vertex. Okay, I could also name this point, a lot of times we name this angles with numbers. We also name these angles with numbers. So I could also call this angle angle 1 if I put that number in there. And the last thing, the way that I can name this angle is by its vertex only. So this could also be called angle C. And then there are a couple of parts of an angle. So notice that an angle like this is made up of rays. The sides are rays. And the vertex is the common endpoint. So in our picture here, we have that the vertex is C, because that's the common endpoint. And the rays that make up this angle are rays CE and CD. Those are the sides of the angle, and the vertex is C. So remember, the rays are the sides. Okay. Remember the words collinear and coplanar? We talked about that. Collinear means belonging to the same line, so any 2 points are collinear. So you could say, if I drew a line and called it AB, then you say points A and B are collinear. Okay, because they lie on the same line. Remember, coplanar means that they belong to the same plane. So any 3 points can be belonging to the same plane. So if I call these points E, F, G, then you can say that they are coplanar because they all lie on the same plane. Any 3 points can make a plane. Okay? And then we already talked about parallel and perpendicular lines. Parallel lines are lines that belong to the same plane and never intersect. Perpendicular form a right angle. And then a couple last ones that we didn't talk about are congruent. You will see that word used a lot. Congruent means it has the exact same size and shape. So two angles or two pictures can be congruent as long as they have the exact same size and shape. Okay, so that's considered congruent. And then a circle, just a definition of a circle is the set of all points in a plane that line the same distance from a single point. So a circle always lies from a single point, and all of these distances lie the same. No matter where you put the lines, they're all going to lie the same distance apart. Okay? So there's some definitions for you to go through and get a hang of. And this is a lot of notes this time for the first day, so let me know if you have any questions. Good luck.